My questions regarding the black gender war.
I have questions about this gender war. When does it end? This thing just keeps going on and on. I'm sorry. Some of us are going to get bored. I don't think people can be in battle for however many centuries, because this thing could go on, I'm sure, for at least 7, 8 more 1,000 years if we let it. I mean, we seem to be a people that are slow to move towards action. We're very silly in that sense. But there's only so much you can say and do. And if you can renovate for all this vitriol, don't you think you can also renovate for the good? What is the goal? I mean, if we're going to have this gender war, what is the goal? Are we going to get to the point where we actually have a point? Because the funny thing is, you'll see these people in this gender war, and they'll say they don't care about the opposite sex. But if you were at peace, you wouldn't want to consume content that can't give you peace. This stuff that is constantly bashing the opposite sex, how does that fill you with peace? Why is the narrative what the opposite sex in your group's not doing if they're no longer relevant to you when you already claim to have a solution? Wouldn't you be invested in that solution, accustomed to that solution? If anything, why are you now still feeding on the toxicity? Some of these people act like they're so unmoved by the chaos, but they constantly want to endure it. They constantly want it to play in their mind. You can't converse about these issues if you're unbothered from it, if it's no longer relevant to you. Is the goal that these people claim reasonable or realistic? In my viewpoint, it's not, because there is no clear goal. If you think constantly talking about the opposite sex is a clear goal, then how is it we're still in chaos now and people are still making broken homes? If you think that gender war is enough to stop these people from recklessly breeding, then why didn't poverty? Why didn't any of our other issues stop us from recklessly breeding? So I don't think the gender war is enough to stop people from having kids out of wedlock. So if you have a goal and it's about the opposite sex, it should be just as much how you gird your loins as it would be how you project them girding them. Adults, all of them, should take accountability. The goal should be all us adults working towards creating solutions within ourselves and how we pair bond and the mates we choose and what type of dynamic we're bringing our offspring into. But if you don't address this reckless breeding habit, the lack of adult men and women, specifically within our demographic, even using something called contraception, then you can't address large-scale issues. Because if you can't, even with the little that's in your control, deal with your problems, how can you deal with the larger issue? How do other demographics find a way not to recklessly breed at the rate that you are? Not just blaming the opposite sex, but also blaming your own depravity. Part of this gender war doesn't even sound like people that actually hate each other but are obsessed. Don't you find that a little creepy? You don't find it creepy to be obsessed every day, constantly thinking? You think because it's a negative obsession that you're not obsessed? You are. And instead of obsessing over these people and having this love-hate relationship with these people and feeling confused and making yourself feel suppressed in your identity and having to go through all these contortions, why don't you just figure out your issues? Adults. We're not talking about people who, because of their biological sex, they're a lesser adult than the other. You're both equally logically capable of making sane decisions or insane decisions. You're both emotionally corrupt. What role do you play in your demise? In the demise of your household, in the demise of your bloodline and generation and lineage through your pair bonding habits. That's what this gender war never tells you, is what role they play in this. Because if you can say the opposite sex is the problem, then you know there's a problem. And if you know there's a problem, how did you not see it when you got with the opposite sex? And if you know there's a problem, how do you not see it within yourself that there could be problems with you as well? And if you know there's a problem, why did you let the opposite sex dupe you when you could have averted that problem in the first place?
What is the gender war? What does it mean for our demographic?
This is how I would word the gender war. I believe the gender war is in a way not that different from any of our other anti-black isms. In other words, the mentalities that we have that are against our DNA or against another demographic within our bloodline. And this could be anything from hating genetics to cultural to their social identity, colorism, featureism, texturism, our diaspora wars. I mean, we have a lot of mental and demented hate against other black people, typically for the dumbest reasons. And what makes it hypocritical is that we'll have this hate against another black person, but then we'll use arguments when it comes to how other groups see us, and we'll say, well, we all bleed red and there is no color and we're all one, but you can't somehow apply that to yourselves. This ism that makes up the gender war, I don't even know if I can call it sexism. Everything we do, we take it to the maximum level. So we take it to the rawest, most primal, difficult, extremely destructive version of what other groups would have in a minute or in a vague and definitely in a largely countered way. If they have gender wars, they counter it with other narratives, or they shut the person down who is inciting violence, inciting danger or harm to their collective. But within our demographic, this gender war has very real-world ramifications, and it's just continuing. No one is trying to, at least on a collective scale, shut it down. We just know it's happening. We can see it around us, but are we doing anything collectively to fix it? Or are we feeding into it? If you want to say that there was a hierarchy with our anti-black isms, just because we have so many areas that we hate about our genetics, that we hate about our own people, then you could even argue that this particular anti-blackness is worse and probably in the top 3, maybe even top 2 of the worst case scenarios that we can possess. Because with your other anti-black isms, you could just faction yourselves off into sizable populations and figure it out. But when you're talking about the battle of the sexes, and to the degree that we take it, which is largely unusual, largely demonic, largely satanic, if you will, if you're talking about our version of battle of the sexes, that's the 2 largest portions of any population, male/female, the 2 largest factions of a group. So if you're separating the males and the females, you're separating the group itself. You can't separate an entire group when little pockets of it go off and do their own thing and they disperse in their own ways because the larger group is still maintained. But when you're talking about a bunch of men and a bunch of women at war, that's going to trickle into, because that's a massive amount of people, the household. That trickles into our ability to create families. That trickles into our ability to have solid children with sane minds. That trickles into the domestic side of our lives and our domestic duties. And if the household doesn't exist, how can we expect the sanctity of our larger group to exist? These men, these women could be potential husbands, potential wives. That means they are the centerpiece of the dialogue with regards to the nuclear family. And this may seem like it's a small issue, the gender war. It may even seem, when you word it that way, kind of silly, but this has very large-scale ramifications because of the aforementioned population size. But likewise, due to the fact that adults, of all people, are the people who cause the most mayhem on the planet. They are the people who cause the most decay to this earth. And they are a people who are fully maturated. So their mentality can harm the most vulnerable people on this planet, who are the children, who are the babies. Adult men and women, they should be, in their age, logical enough, mindful enough, empathetic enough, regulated enough, so that they are not causing harm to themselves or another, or any other humans on this planet, but they typically are. If you can't regulate adult behaviors, if you can't put proverbial sanctions or put boundaries in adult men and women so that they can be balanced, they will cause harm to themselves. They will cause harm to large swaths of humanity, offspring, to generations to come. What's lethal about this gender war is that neither the men nor the women see their faults within our issues. A lot of this is sexual lack of discipline, people not having any system of beliefs or regulation of behaviors to filter their choices, lack of actual or healthy communication. If you're an adult and you cannot be regulated, how can you then blame someone else for not being regulated if you can't even do that for yourselves? Don't they realize their words are more than mere words? These words are violence. The words itself are violence because they can cause us to be traumatized and self-harm, but also the words can incite violence. This is a dangerous game that we are playing with our lives, lowering the value of life itself by not giving people anything that would cause them to want to live. You're weaponizing rhetoric with this gender war issue. I believe that this gender war did not begin or end with the internet age. I believe it began as our choices in the home trickled to the larger world. That we were not creating homes, that we were not being fortified within our homes, and that also the community, which is also used to regulate each household, and I paraphrase, but from my research, communities play a large part in the sanctity of marriage, so that communities symbiotically benefit marriages. So we did not have large communities because we had many broken homes. We didn't have in our homes anything that would give us regulation, and we didn't have communities at large that were regulated. And we didn't somehow sharpen each other in the areas that there were strengths. And so we contributed to this social decay. But if we take the reins of this demented era and begin to work towards reasonable solutions, we can undo this gender war. Because what would make sense about warring with yourself? You share the same overall bloodline, you share the same DNA, you're a part of the same heritage, you have the same history, you are the same people. But to be at war with that means you're at war with your match. And when two people are equally yoked in chaos, how does anyone actually win? The gender war is the proliferation, exacerbation, and even the celebration of broken homes. Rather than a traditional war where there's an actual end, a solution, a purpose, a clear sense of winner and loser, this specific war that we have is an ambiguous battle that doesn't even feel like there's ever a real point.
The battle of the equally yoked sexes.
This war is not good because we are too equally yoked. It's a little difficult to win a war when the other person is your match. In other words, that for the bad or the good, they match you in intensity. And that's unusually passionate. That's unusually confused. That's unusually difficult to bear, that someone can match your intensity and your flame and your fire. That's difficult to bear that. Never mind the fact that when people have children, they could have any kind of children, so of any kind of biological sex. So you can't really war with someone who is genetically self-same to you. It doesn't make sense when we do it across tribe. It doesn't make sense when we do it across geographic barriers. And it still doesn't make sense when we do it across biological sexes. Let us use our strengths, our similitude, ancestry, our history, our knowledge, our shared difficulties, and everything good about us for the benefit of us. not to war. We can have more lives being saved and more wholesomeness and more peace and more joy if we could use to our benefit the qualities that we're currently using to battle one another.
The internet could have been a tool to empower us, but instead, it is being used as a weapon to destroy us from the inside out.
This is a concept that I want to dive into, and maybe not as much in this discussion, but I can paraphrase and say that there is actually a branch of psychology referred to as media psychology, and it studies how media influences our behaviors, society as a whole, on a large scale and individual scale. And even just through common sense, it has to be pretty addictive and advancing and informative, and something that can actually be a tool if we're going to consume it. Anything that you consume and anything that you use to disperse information, of course, psychologically is going to play a role, I would think, in the ways that we live our lives. So you would think, knowing that, we would take it upon ourselves having the responsibility of what information are we sharing? Why are we sharing it? How is this going to affect vulnerable people? And when I say vulnerable, I mean people with no access to resources that are really going to protect them on a large scale. We're talking about a people that in many ways are an underclass. So instead of making their lives difficult, you could actually use this as PR to benefit them and give them access to resources and greater likelihood of survival. But guess what? And of course, we're going to take everything that is good and we're going to demonize it. And so rather than using media as a tool to build us, we're using it as a tool to destroy us. And I'm not talking about media with regards to networks and what people refer to as mainstream media. I'm talking about social media and how we're using it to inform ourselves in this social violence and sometimes even physical violence. What is our responsibility with social media and how we use it to cause even further chaos to ourselves? And also, is this ethical? How can you use knowledge to better populations rather than worsen them? And what if we could use the internet as an edifying tool to build our lives rather than tear our lives down? What if we could use the internet to benefit our families rather than harm our families? Because in a family, we're talking husband and wife and their children. That's representing different biological sexes and different generations of humans. Somebody is going to be affected within the Black race by some kind of Black person because we are directly responsible in creating these people. And in one household, all the markers between us are represented. So you would think we would see it that way and say, you know what, it's our responsibility to protect our demographic with our words. But you know what, we don't. We use our words, instead of like the scripture says, iron sharpens iron, we use our words to not sharpen each other, but make each other dull, make each other delusional, make each other disturbed, mentally angrier, depressed, depraved. That's completely irresponsible. And it's funny how we're going to be talking about empowerment, and we'll talk about empowerment as if you can even be trusted with resources in the proverbial grid, so to speak. You can't be entrusted with these large-scale factors if you can't even deal with the one thing in your control or the few things in your control that could benefit you. If you had those bigger things, I'd be afraid of this world. If our people had the power that they say they want and the mentality that they currently possess, I would be afraid of our place in this world. And you wouldn't actually have to deal with outside, but more the inside of you. You'd be protesting yourselves at that point. And we have to protest ourselves with these elements within us that are making life hell.
If we want loyalty, unity, and to rise as a bloodline, we must start using incentives.
Concepts of loyalty. Like, there are people who counter the narrative of the gender war by saying, well, we should unite and we should be one. And they'll make it seem like you should be loyal to each other because of our history or because of the problems that affect us. If that was enough to make us loyal to each other, we simply would be. But clearly it's not. And that's where we have to become innovative. If you want some kind of group sense of loyalty, give us something that we would be loyal to. We need to, as individuals, have self-preservation, but we also compound that as collectives. So if you feel that the individual should align to the group in a self-preservation way, and that by aligning to the group that is self-preservation, then give them incentive. We need to be more of an incentivist population. We need to create material and social incentives so that we're giving each other the best of ourselves and that we would want to create stable families with each other. But if you give us nothing, then what are we going to use as a determining factor of value? Yes, other groups give each other incentive. One, because they marry each other at extremely high rates, so they already have the expectation that they're going to have solid homes. Two, because they have a high sense of group esteem and they constantly work to make themselves the beauty standard, and they constantly work to make themselves the standard of everything so that they don't have to look outside of themselves to initiate value. That's incentive. And I'm sure there are many other ways that they create incentives, but even the long-term pair bonding via marriage and knowing that they're going to have solid families more often than not, that's incentive. We have to enhance our values if we want to be this concept of a group that is actually bound by more than just circumstance, but via loyalty. Incentive matters. And we have to change the way we are relevant. We're not just relevant because of our history and all the qualms that we faced. We're also relevant if we compound to that higher esteem, building onto that narrative. But our social choices today matter probably more than what you consider history, because history could just stay in the past, or you can move it forward into the present by making your choices and how you validate each other easier to grasp. Give us something that we can look at today, because we don't really know each other and we can't with all this brokenness. Give us something more than brokenness. Yes, we have brokenness. We understand that brokenness, but that's not it. That's not the only talking point. There has to be more than that. Yes, you have brokenness, but that's really the admission of failure. And the minute you can admit something is wrong, that's the first step to finding a solution, but that isn't the only thing. We were never supposed to take our situation and become so embarrassed that we made it difficult for each other to find worth. We were never supposed to take our situation and become so cut off that we made it difficult for each other to find access. We are human resources. How can someone access a family, access a partner, if we make ourselves so rare, if we make ourselves cut off? But you have to understand the conundrum continues because we provide zero incentive. And we can all give each other something, but you give us nothing. You don't give us kindness. You don't give us mercy. You don't have love for yourself. So you know you're going to project that to the opposite sex. You know you're going to project that to other black people. So if you don't give us anything, we're going to cut each other off from each other. When we could have easily been resources such as allies, such as progenitors, such as whatever it is who has the knowledge in a networking way. We could have easily been that if we weren't so cut off. We were supposed to work together for our best interests because we have each other. Remember that you have each other, but use that from a level of not expectation only, but value. Valuing that person for who they really are. And their humanity matters, so you're verifying that via our actions.
We are amplifying adult loneliness via this gender war, not having access to human resources to create families, thus cheapening the idea of marriage.
I feel that this gender war is making existential loneliness more amplified, that it's making us vulnerable even further than we already are, and it's making the idea of having families seem cheap. Without families, we have no protection. We're all just to ourselves, just navigating this world without any hope. And that sucks. It sucks the life out of life when you can't live it. It sucks the life out of life when you're not encouraged to enjoy the simple pleasures. Even when I look at the scripture and it says that it's not good to be alone, it didn't give a structural reason, even though I'm sure there are structural reasons for marriage. It didn't give a medical or legal reason, even though there are medical benefits and legal benefits to marriage. It didn't give the economic and so on. I'm sure that was implied, but at its core, it's not good to be alone. The scripture always encourages two or more. It encourages groups. But we want to discourage groups. We want to discourage having that cohesion, and instead we want to encourage chaos and division. I don't like the world that we call life, because there's no families, there's no peace, there's no joy, there's no marriage, over-sexuality, reckless breeding, children that are being tormented and abused, households that are being destroyed through our own hand, and just the lack of communication, the gender war, and every kind of issue that you can possess. But I also see much of it as within our control in a way, at least when it comes to the social affairs and the domestic duties that we are not doing or that we're doing. And it shows a lack of love and a lack of humanity and a lack of respect for ourselves. If anybody needs to believe our lives matter, it's not other demographics, it's us.
We need to remember to give each other mercy, human decency, and respect, because contextually speaking, if they are black, they likely go through much trauma.
Are we going to take our lives seriously for a change? And if you don't want to believe in a group and you feel like everything goes, we're all human after all, then at least project that on the next person who has it very difficult if they're going to be born in this demographic. Like, if we're all human and we all live similar lives, then can we just make the ones that look very similar to our lives easier for a change? Because all this empathy that we can somehow scrounge for other demographics who may not be as kind, the way you can recognize humanity outside of you, you can do that for people within you too. And not from a transactional basis. They don't have to do anything, only exist. And you can still have some kind of mercy and kindness and tenderness towards that person. Because more than likely, especially if they're black, they are dealing with intergenerational trauma. They are dealing with household trauma. All of these things are compounded, of course, external trauma. So have some kind of encouragement for a person who's likely enduring much. And think about it. We are a demographic enduring so much, but without the resources to combat everything that we have to deal with. It's not like our people have access to mental health resources or even respected as being people who can go through mental health difficulties. Well, they're dealing with all this trauma, most of which undiagnosed. Their circumstances undiagnosed in certain instances. They're not being dealt with in other instances. Whatever it is, they're getting the unside of things. The side of things that is not priority. Even in their worst case scenario conditions, they are not the priority. Give these people some kind of grace. Be the person to understand the metacognitive dissonance that they may face or the issues that contextually make up their lives. Be the person to add context. Be the person to add flavor and mercy to their conditioning, as opposed to just looking at our people and seeing them as devils. No, these people are a people that are largely traumatized, and via cause/effect, you have more wars and hate against you than you do love and homes within you. And you think people are going to be sane in that? I just see our people as high-functioning, insane people. High-functioning people of trauma. High-functioning, even in the worst-case scenario. But just because they're high-functioning doesn't mean they're not struggling with something. They're just struggling with it, but at its highest peak. And they know how to deal with it and make their lives look somewhat normal. But it will come out, the oddities, the idiosyncrasies, because we are a people, once again, we have unchecked difficulties. We could have used this internet to do the opposite of what we could have experienced in our larger world. But did you do that? No. We used the internet to compound all the trauma, as if you didn't have enough trauma. I'm sure it's embedded in your very DNA, even to the point of affecting our appearance, changing our very blood, changing our very brain, and the chemistry of our own mental health. Because all of this gender war is affecting our ability to be safe. These words are harmful to our mental health. They are harmful to our physical well-being, our safety. They're very traumatized people. All the compounded trauma we face, from intergenerational to external, to resource scarcity, to household. We have much trauma, much of which undiagnosed, much of which is unmedicated. And all this trauma is being the oil to the fire, depending on the wrong mind and how they can use that to cause harm to our own. And we're already in a vulnerable position, so these words don't help. It's also affecting our sanity, because now we're having a scarred view of ourselves. It's ruining our self-esteem. It's hard not to hate the opposite sex and then not have low self-esteem, because somehow the opposite sex contributed to your existence. So you're always going to live in this dissonance between who you think is this us versus who you think is them. Because if you're going to hate the opposite sex, you're going to say, well, maybe not all. And you're going to constantly have to use disclaimers like that when you could just say, it's not even an issue we should have made into this extreme in the first place. So that you're not feeling confusion with this gender war between your family members, like your parents, versus the opposite sex in your demographic. And it just doesn't work like that. You can't just slice people half in the middle like that and expect it to be sane. You're always going to be confused with this gender war if you have to pick sides within a group that is automatically designed to be one. This is affecting our ability to be collectivist, which we should be, because the more people we can get on our side who are pro us and for us, and the more we can change our reality, which is vulnerable and disgruntling, the more we can enjoy our bloodline and our place in this world as a bloodline. And just for the sake of self-preservation, collectivism is necessary for us. This is also affecting our infrastructure, because this is a distraction. Instead of being able to conquer other areas of our lack, other areas that need to be focused on, we're constantly thinking about the gender war. We're constantly focusing on non-issues or issues that are important, but that aren't helping us obtain intergenerational wealth or a place in this world that isn't as vulnerable. And this is also affecting our ability to build families. It's family building. And when I say family building, the minute you marry the opposite sex, they're family to you. And in my belief system, because you covenanted yourself to them, they are your person. So building families with one of the members of the opposite sex within our demographic, but also building family as a demographic. I can't see us as a civil people or a people that would be safe to be around. We're fleeing each other because we're not safe around each other. So we could otherwise build the sense of family within our people as a group, but we can't do that with all this war and infighting. And I don't want to war with the opposite sex in my own demographic. I want us to build families as a demographic. I want us to build healthy homes as a demographic. But another reason I don't want to war with the opposite sex in my demographic is because I think about the historical proportions of our identity. There was never a time that we were, depending on your biological sex, one group didn't go through the same disturbed position than the other. Unfortunately, we were besieged and conquered as a group. And if you can be historically in that position, the scripture says that there's nothing new under the sun, you can definitely be put in that position later on. Because other populations, being that they're more wholesome, and by wholesome I mean they see themselves as a whole, they don't see themselves as factions, they don't see themselves as parts, they're not as demented, so they can't. They see themselves as an entire group. They understand that regardless of your biological makeup, male-female, you're going to be within the group. You share the same overall DNA and you are a people. Since they see themselves as a whole, they have no problem, if it had to come down to it, destroying the entirety of what's outside of them, because they're not going to have those exceptions. There are portions within our demographic that would have you think that there are exceptions, but both sides think they are the exception. And both sides can be right, because an exception is just that. But it doesn't exempt the larger variety of us. So for those of us who can't be the exceptions for whatever the reason, what do we do? So we have no choice but to create solutions, because exceptions can't be a larger portion of an entire group. They can only be the part of the group that can be somewhat accepted to other groups and upon against us, but never put above other groups. And of course, I don't want to war with the opposite sex because it's weakening our sense of being able to relate. Which, how can you build healthy homes, healthy civilization without the kindness of heart and sanity and being able to somewhat get along? Because the idealist reality that the gender war generals, whatever the different factions of their militaristic portion is not going to help the rest of us. Since we can't peel off our skin and just be something else, we're going to have to live with what God entitled us to be. So what is within us the solution? We can't just keep vying to be exceptions when other groups have a formidable rule, when other groups are that much tighter in their sense of influence. They have a stronger sense of self. They love their families. They love themselves way more than us. So how can we be the exceptions to a group that has stronger boundaries? How can you be the exceptions to a group in a large scale, that has a higher sense of marriage, a higher sense of community, and love their DNA? And then you have to think about the concept of wealth and why wealth can't just be seen as individual, but more demographic. I still think the wealth gap is a perfect reason why concepts of anti-blackness make zero sense. Because it's not certain black people are in such a greater position that they can lift the entirety of themselves or even their group as a whole out of their dysfunction. So because small parts of us cannot change the larger orientation of our poverty, and the fact that it is as a group a difference between us and other populations, can't we see that it wouldn't make any sense to think a gender war makes a logical point? My theory is that with all the broken homes and how you compound the amount of broken homes to our larger society, we're not going to know each other that well. So a lot of the things that people are saying, well, black women do this and black men do that. Well, you don't even really know them because you're not creating solid households with these people. And you're not even knowing these people at their best. You're knowing these people under heavy trauma and resource scarcity and just the fact that they are not sane and they're not trying to find solutions within themselves. So you're knowing us at our worst. So the ability to know each other when you're not pair bonding with your spouse for decades because you're not even marrying at all, is going to be depleted. The ability to know each other when you're not creating healthy home lives, but you're creating children under whatever the oddity is that our people feel that they should create children under broken home conditions. You're not going to know someone when your collective is constantly dealing with not even just this gender war, but even warlike conditions. So we should be working towards knowing each other, and not knowing each other as enemies or people that could cause us trauma or stress, but knowing each other as families and as a community.
Let us rebuild the Black family. Let us protect the Black family. Let us support the Black family. We are the Black family. What is the point, benefit, and purpose of only uniting with the same sex? How does it benefit us to only unite with the same sexes? Why can't we unite with the opposite sex to diversify ourselves?
And I don't think we can take one side with this gender war, because why would I feel comfortable uniting with just women as a woman? Like, why would I feel that that's normal behavior? These women are not going to provide me a family. These women are not going to be people that help build my home life. And the same is true for so many other women who could potentially be wives. And the same is true for these men. These are not men that you're going to build families with. These are not men that you're going to have any incentive for. And it's not that we can't unite with each other of the same sex in order to create friendships and other networking opportunities. Like, I think there should be wives clubs and husband clubs and things that people can relate to. And I think we need more organizations within ourselves that would have that support group within what is a married couple, and people having people they can relate to. But it should never be to forsake marriage. That's not how we are designed by God. I do not think genders can take one side to benefit total unity. That's a limitation of self, that's a limitation of knowledge, that's a limitation of mind, and it's just sexist, but it's also kind of boring. There's a way that women think, and there's a way that men think, and sometimes just as a person, just being people, let's just have access to the range of us. It's richer that way. It's purer that way. It's safer that way. It's more beautiful that way. And plus, you're uniting under trauma when you're uniting with the same sex to bash the opposite sex. If we're going to be uniting the same sexes, it should be under a shared sense of self and vision and joy, not under trauma. It would be nice to see many more wives and many more husbands, but not from a traumatic standpoint, because we're not benefiting each other. It's actually a wicked codependence when we're getting together and we're gathering, and instead of contributing to each other's peace, we're contributing to each other's chaos, which essentially makes the case that when we unite with the same sex, it's not under the right reasons, is it? So let's make family so that if we can unite, it would feel like an extension of the family. It's okay that we need someone to cuddle with. It's okay that we need someone that is our person, someone we can kiss and love and enjoy physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and share lives with and bloodline with. It's okay that that's a good thing, and that's a good unity. Not this, well, let me get together and let's disperse trauma by talking about how bad the opposite sex is, because it's a conflict of interest. But if you desire the opposite sex, now you have to suppress that. For what? For people that, if we work together and find solutions, would actually benefit us more than this trauma?
We need to network with the opposite sex, ideally, to create massive cohesion of our people. Let us not deprive ourselves of one another via this gender war.
I'm tired of breaking the network of people. It should have been that we were totally unified across cultures, across geographic ranges, across our ways of life, across biological sexes, across whatever the demographic markers there are. You see, I do not want to not have any relatability to the opposite sex. And the reason I state this is because you're born the biological sex that you are, so you can sort of understand it a lot greater. But if we network with the opposite sex, they're giving us insight into a world that is not our own. Men need to network with women so they can understand that other side of the human experience, and vice versa. Women need to network with men so that they can understand that other side of the human experience. Marital networking is the ability to sexually pair bond effectively. It's the ability to have consensually soothing relationships that can make each other's lives better. Why can't we pair bond with the opposite sex? Why can't we network with the opposite sex? Make peace with the opposite sex? Wouldn't you want them, if you're attracted to them, to create a family with them? So why break that network? And it's so rich to learn the opposite of yourself. It's so rich to understand another part of what is being human, because you're not going to have the full picture as a mortal. So having that other person that helps add to that picture is really beautiful, their vantage point. It's really beautiful, the qualities that women and men have within ourselves. It's really beautiful to see how the opposite sex sees and thinks. Maybe our communication is unfortunate and primitive, but we're all human, aren't we? So let's make family, not war. Let's make marriage, not war. That's the strangest battle you can have, because it's a contradiction to our innate attractions. So if we're going to be warring with someone that you're attracted to, that's a bit of a compromise.
Why is the Black collective so antisocial? How does that benefit our unity, families, and marriages?
And we have to realize that we are antisocial. And by antisocial, I'm not referring to the concept of introversion or shyness. Antisocial is being able to be anti the traits and characteristics that would make social behaviors and norms acceptable, that would make it easier to relate to other human beings. So you know what is antisocial behavior? When you mistreat someone, when you mock and bully someone, when you scam someone or abuse someone. These are what is referred to as antisocial behaviors. Who would want to marry that image? We got to shift that image. And if you're antisocial, to be frank, you're anti-life, because you're anti the sanctity of someone else's life. You don't respect the quality of their life. You don't respect the humanity in their life. You don't respect them as a separate human being. So we got to get rid of these anti-life patterns. We have to be pro-life, pro-family, pro-marriage, pro-community, pro-commitment, pro-order, and we need civilization. Not with a few, we need to get our entire population under control. And it starts by adult accountability and adults being regulated in our behaviors.
We are way too anti-marriage as a bloodline, and this behavior is ruining our sense of self.
We have to observe other groups. They're so pro-marriage. We're anti-marriage. They're so much more likely to create families and get married. You're not. They're romantic in their music. Their music actually makes you want to get married. Our music is about sex and drugs and violence and how to one-up the other sex. There's nothing about the way we live in this world that preaches love and romance and peace and desire and attraction, but more some form of violence in the rhetoric. Understand that this socializes you to be anti-family, anti-marriage. We need family friendliness. We need to get rid of our wickedness. We need to become softer in our minds and hearts, not so cold and harsh. Stop acting like it's this bigger picture. We are the anti-marriage people with our content.
There are many contributions we make, as a demographic, and so much so, that it is limiting us to only unite with one sex via this gender war.
I find the gender war boring because it forces me to, let's say if I was choosing to be on the woman's side of it, or if you're a man and you choose to be on the man's side of it, depending on what your biological sex is, whatever side you align to, that's the side that you get the most influence from. That's boring because, let's say when we're talking about attraction, you can't even feed on your attraction because you have to only be around, let's say women all day if you're a woman, men all day if you're a man. That's bogus. You want the people that you're attracted to be the center of your influence. And it's also bogus because even if you take attraction completely out of it, there are many great contributions that men and women have made within our demographic. And sometimes I like to enjoy their contribution. I want to make families with one of these people. I don't want to hate and make enemies. Families versus enemies. It's boring to have to align to the people that in many cases you're not making a family with. You're making war with those people and you need them as your allies to make war with the person you could be making family with. So you could be making family with the opposite sex, but you're making war, but you need the same sex to help you make war? Why not use the same sex to help you make family so that you can use those people to help teach us how to be, like the scriptures say, the women teach the women, the men teach the men, so that they can teach you how to make better families. Why did it have to get to the point where our would-be husbands and the would-be wives are, instead of finding peace within themselves and each other, creating this bitter marriage/divorce against each other? It's like we're divorcing ourselves as a group. Let's stop with this one-sided gender thing. You're not going to know the other side of humanity if it's just from one vantage point. We need the opposite sex and their role in us. And that's how God designed it. So that the opposite sex is one part of our kindred. And so they are mattering to us as much as we matter. And we have to learn to see it that way. That's what harmony is. It would be so yucky if it was just women or just men. What makes it yucky is there's no diversity in that. There's no complexity in that. Maybe sometimes there is a balance between the sexes. We don't have to be identical. Let's find what that balance could look like.
Please stop making enemies out of us.
Stop making enemies out of us. Yes, you can make an enemy out of us, but we are not your inborn enemies. Going into scripture, it does talk about mortal enemies and the differentiation between enemies from those that are more of a person within your demographic versus a mortal threat. And the difference between a mortal threat and a person that God would intend for you to forgive is the difference between war and restoration. War, because it's happening across civilizations and across demographics, that was the only war that, from my research in the Old Testament, we would have. But when it came to other people who were within a shared demographic, and especially if they were amongst the covenanted people, they were not supposed to be at war with each other. There was a way that they had to deal with their disputes in order to regulate themselves and create peace. So don't make an enemy out of people that are not a mortal enemy. Make solutions out of them. Unless you find a way to make them completely destroyed and not exist, you're still going to have to deal with them somehow. It's not so much that their degree of separation from you is so far. They literally are part of you. So you're going to have to figure out in a solution-based manner how to make this work. Because for those who will see the value in themselves, they're going to replenish the earth within themselves. Then that's more people for you to contend with. So if you're dealing with enemies in your group, you're going to have to understand the replenishment rates of their sentience. And if you're dealing with people in your group as enemies, then that means you're at least smart enough to categorically understand that there are different functions of us. But if you can understand that there are different functions of us, shouldn't that mean that you know that some people may be a threat and others are not? Rather than having this blanket statement mentality towards all of us.
Let's make families and not war. Let's make more families. Let us cherish the Black family. We are the Black family. Let's stop acting like biological sex makes you somehow a lesser adult who cannot take accountability for your bad choices.
Which of the sexes amongst adult people is the more qualified adult? Which of the sexes amongst adult people is the epitome of an adult? In other words, the adultier adult. Because in my viewpoint, they are interdependent, they are complementary, and they are designed both in the image of God. Thus, they both, even in their different biological functions, contribute a massive purpose to the quality and the sanctity of this world, and the quality and the sanctity of each other's lives, and the quality and the sanctity of being parents and the future home that they can create together. We don't have to presume that one is more logical and the other isn't, because you're incentivizing that person who you would perceive as illogical to continue chaos, when we should be incentivizing adults to have responsibility, be held accountable for their chaos, and to do the right thing every time. And you know what's funny is you'll have people downgrading the logic depending on the opposite sex, and they'll say that certain groups are not as smart, but then you will have families with that person, but you just won't take care of the family you made with that person, so you're not smart. It's not smart to be with someone you consider dumb and then abandon your families. It's not smart for people to blame the opposite sex for everything, but then you were supposedly smarter than them. So why did you fall prey to whatever schemes they had? Both adult men and women, you must be held accountable. You must be regulated. You must be put in a situation where you can know that you've done wrong so that you can then fix your issues. Stop making it seem like it's somebody else's fault when you as an adult decided to have a consensual relationship that led to a broken home. Fix the problem as adult men and women, as adult women and men. Fix it. Because the children can't fix the fact that you brought them into existence beyond their control. The children can't fix the broken communities that adult men and women create through their sexual depravity. Don't you realize you people are sexually depraved? Don't you realize our bloodline is way too over-sexualized? They're having random, meaningless, casual sex with anyone and everyone they can get. And don't you think that's dangerous to your bodies? That's already dangerous when it comes to STDs. That's already dangerous when it comes to even just, you don't know these people. You don't know what they're capable of doing. You're seeing them at their rotten state of being. And you know they're immoral if they're willing to do that with a stranger. You're already doing this at the behest and the mercy of what God designed as natural order. And then you're going to act like it's the other person's fault. Then you have no maturity within yourselves. And these gender war deviants should not be the megaphone for the rest of us, because not all of us want to live like those who have destroyed their lives, those who feel that it's everybody else's fault, but they are the people at fault. What's ironic is that when you ask these people who's at fault for why they are abandoning their families or even creating families out of order, they will blame the opposite sex. But the question is, why should you be a parent? You clearly have no boundaries. You clearly have no morality. You clearly are not disciplined. You clearly have no self-respect. You clearly have no decency within yourselves. You clearly don't understand the interdependence of the opposite sex and the role that they play in benefiting our world. How can you lead this next generation? What are you going to teach them? And considering how many people have led their offspring to that same broken home format tells you that we have incompetent people playing the role as what they consider parents. Grow up before you can raise another person. Grow up before you think you're an adult. Because it seems like being an adult is more than just your age. It's also your ability to be regulated and to understand that you can either create ideals or chaos for the rest of the world. The true people, and even they are having guardians that have to regulate them. But these types of people, the true people who can say they really didn't know or that they were immature, are the young children within our demographic. Those are the ones who have an excuse. But when you're an adult, you don't have that excuse. Stop reverting into this childlike phase. If you can expect children to be held accountable for their issues, what much more should you be held accountable for your issues as adult men and women? Your sexual depravity is a choice. In these consensual, broken homes, which you can see before it even started, it's a choice. You know it's a choice. Because a broken home is created the minute you cohabitate with someone, and this is data that I'm going to show you on the screen. The minute you cohabitate with someone, you are 2 times likelier of breaking up at the time of that child's birth. Only married couples have more stability than cohabitating boyfriends and girlfriends. So you created the broken home anytime you chose to have a child with a person you were dating. Get rid of these primitivities and get married. If you can have kids with someone, you can get married to that person. That's what adults do. Adults get married. Adults have respect for other people's space and time. Adults create homes. Adults have responsibilities, and they want to raise their children with their specific spouse who they decided to have kids with. They don't blame the opposite sex for breaking the family that they sexually were bound to create when they refused to even use contraception. You are the breakdown of the black family.
Let us compare our depravities to the quality of life found in other demographics.
And we have to notice other groups. We have to notice the difference. Don't you notice that even with other groups and their inner disparities, they do not consume themselves entirely or even mostly. They have their issues, but it won't stop the majority of them from creating families. And according to the data, and I've shown this in my other videos, most of them are creating families. Most of them are getting married. Most of them will understand what it's like to have a mom and a dad in the home. Most of them will understand that across their neighborhoods and states and countries. Observe the fact that their frailties do not destroy them. Our frailties, and we're already in a vulnerable condition, and the fact that we never have solutions, and the fact that we don't have counter narratives, our frailties will consume us every single time. You don't see them cannibalize themselves with harsh words and harsh imagery and content. They keep their content, even at a sexualized level, for example, they keep it from taking an extreme tone. Anything that could take on an extreme, they twist it and they flip it. They are the masterminds of PR when it comes to making themselves look better. Now, this isn't to say that they don't call out the misdeeds and the miscreants, but they know how to do that without making the entire population somehow a devil. This gender war has a way of making all of us look bad. It uncovers your proverbial nakedness, because this gender war is showing you you don't have homes, you don't have fathers, you don't have mothers, you don't have families. They cannot take it to this level because someone in their biology is going to be affected, and they don't want that. They're not as primitive with gender. They're not as primitive in seeing themselves as men and women, nor will they project primitivity on themselves. They just see themselves as people, and they have a more egalitarian viewpoint of their personhood. And so they want to benefit each other, and that could be their friend, and that could be their partner, and that could be someone that's just a regular person minding their business, but they empathize so highly within themselves that whoever that could be, they know innately that person has worth. And so they're not going to make it a binary of us versus them within themselves. They would rather have us versus them outside of themselves. And you know what's interesting? They will have us versus them outside of themselves, and that's where we come in. We become their scapegoat, so to speak. We become the person that's constantly the bearers of bad news and some kind of way that they can express whatever their inner frailties are. I noticed that when they want to be true sexist, they can express that to us. When they want to be true, whatever the different demographic markers that are anti, they can't do it within themselves, and they won't. But if they want to express their real rage, they do it with us. And then somehow we get mad at that, and we're saying, well, why can't you love us, and why can't you value us? Well, it's because they value themselves. And if you valued yourself as much as they valued themselves, you wouldn't care if they valued you or hated you. But you hate yourself, and then you're asking people to love you. And you don't even have anything figured out to where you can expect their love. They have better boundaries. They have a better sense of group identity. They know what they're supposed to look like. They know what their genetics are supposed to create. They know themselves on a higher level, and they can't afford to destroy themselves because they don't have that sense of in-group respect for you, because innately you're not their group. And likewise, that kinship that they have worked generations to cultivate, and that they're still working towards in their high marriage rates and family rates. So they're very group-oriented, and they want, and they love, and they vie for the worth of their group. And for something as important as biological sex, when that's part of what makes us a flavorful people, when that's part of what helps drive our humanity, if God wanted all of us to be the same, we would all look the same and act the same. But guess what? There's going to be different aspects of us that are going to make up our identity. Why can't we use that to our advantage? That's just more allies for you to enjoy. That's just more people that you can otherwise empathize with. That's just more people that you can otherwise make life with. But you choose to make them your enemy, and you're already dealing with all these other enemies outside of you, circumstantially, existentially, externally. First of all, your biological sex and the differences between it, that's not an issue. If you can let go of the primitivities of hierarchy and all the primitivities that we possess, we can actually move forward for a change. And also, a lot of us, we want to believe our lives matter. We want to believe Black lives matter. But how can they matter if you're not building anything around our lives that show that we can have a decent place in this world, that show that we can have peace in this world, that show that we can matter in this world, not just externally, but within ourselves? Or did you just give up on that because you feel there's no hope in that, so that's why you're expecting others to see what you can't even see? I believe our lives matter, and the conditions around it matter, and we have to start somewhere. The anti-everything narrative, that has to go so that it can be replaced with pro-us rhetoric.
There is no discernible pro-marriage culture. There is no sense of carved identity. Where is the logical progression?
Where is our desire to rebuild the Black family? The desire to rebuild the Black family should be a charge that we all consider and that we all work towards, because it is the center of the sanctity of our race. Where is that as the conversation? Where is that as the center of our dialogue? Why did the gender war have to replace the family and dialogue that would be pro-family? Where is the logical progression that we as individuals should have? And by logical progression, I mean, in other demographics, they know by a certain age they have to get married. They know by a certain age they have to have a family. They even put age parameters so that it can incentivize marriage for them. With us, when do you get to the age where you finally settle down, where you finally say, I'm going to create a family, where I'm going to create life? When do you get to that point? Because when I look around and I see even people who are way older, and they're in some cases still dating at ages that are really too mature, you're just like, where are we as a people? Where is any defined sense of category from elders to offspring? Why does everything have to be in this useless blob? When do we start carving out identity via our choices and our adult decisions? Instead of having baby this and that, baby that and that, let's have married parents, not baby daddies and baby mamas. Let's have nuclear families, not broken homes and single families. We need an abundance of families, an abundance of Black families and couples. You don't have to run out. There's no scarcity. There needs to be more. We need to affirm the culture of restoration, unity, self-love. We got to build up everything that makes up our lived identity. Every area of human activity, we need to restore that. Marriage creates love because it gives you someone that is yours, and it gives you a family that is yours, your own influence in this world. It's like every household is its own mini civilization, its own miniature government. It gives you something to govern and secure and take care of and be a part of, and something to feel safe in and loved in and cozy in and nurtured in. It gives you people. Going back to the premise, it's not good to be alone. It gives you that ability to have people so you're not alone. With all this hate and the lack of marriage, I'm going to see it as interconnected, that the lack of marriage is what makes us hate each other. And if we had more marriage, we would have more love. If we had more families, we would have more of a solid impact in this world. And of course, a greater sense of unity. And we have to get to the point where we're all walking in that excitement to be alive, excitement to be connected, excitement to be one people. We have to realize that there is too much abundance within us. We are the human resources, and there is a resource abundance within us, within our look, within our DNA, within how God designed us to come off. There is an abundance. And we can't just rely even on just couples. We have to make it a community issue. We need meetings. Because if you look at other demographics, they have meetings. They have forums. They have dialogue that they can go to help encourage their marriages. Seminars that help them understand the role of being a parent, understand the role of being married, understand the role of community. They're always playing into that iron sharpens iron role. They don't ask us for help. They do it for themselves. Let's do for ourselves what we can do as adults. Let's adult people work together. You often hear people say, well, we're all equal. If we're equal, let's work towards that sharpening of our equality. If we're equal, then we all play a role in our demise or in our rise. It doesn't have to be this, the men can do this, the women. We all can play a role in that rise.
We need to see our collective as a house that we must get in order. We need to see ourselves as a body with different parts. We can all play a role in our rise.
This is another discussion, and I'm not going to get fully into that in this particular video, but I believe it should be made known. And that is, I noticed that in scriptures, God refers to people as groups, not so much just individuals. And even if he was speaking to individuals, it still was tied to a group context. Scriptures often talk about bloodlines and covenant, which is a way of binding a group to a shared agreement, among other themes that covenant represents. And something that I noticed about when the scriptures often refer to people as groups is, number one, groups start with two and more. And number two, that God would refer to entire populations, in some cases, as a house. So he would call them the house of insert whatever their kingdom was named. So whether it was the house of Israel or the house of Edom, so on and so forth, they would be referred to as a house. They would be referred to as a body. And one body, but just many different parts. One house, but there are many rooms, so to speak. And when you're thinking about a house, you have to get your house in order for that house to be a place that's livable. And every room matters within one house. There are many issues that we have. Let's start cleaning up those issues so we can get our house in order. If we're a body and there's different parts, let's start improving the health of these different parts of us so that the whole body can be at peace. But if we see it more from that group scale, it's a lot less that you have to do individually, because you're not changing the world. All of us are changing our part of the world, which is changing the world. And if you want to take this individualistic approach, it still wouldn't make sense, because every other group, especially the groups that have much more power than us, are not. And from what I can tell via scripture, it's very difficult for created beings to survive without the group. That's why the group was designed. That's why proportions that make up groups and regulations are designed, so that survival is easier. Think about wolves and why they are in packs. Think about flocks and so on and so forth, the different names of animals within their groups. From schools to flocks to packs to whatever the other names are, they're doing that for survival, relatability, kinship, reproduction, among other themes. Even the fact that we exist, you're not born into, in most cases, some kind of a vacuum or a tube. You're born by two people. That's a very group-oriented reality. If your own sentience could only be fulfilled via at least two portions of DNA coming together, then we could never see ourselves as self-contained identities, self-contained living beings. We're all going to have to rely on the group somehow, whether it's to bring us into fruition, whether it's to nurture our place in fruition, and whether it's to determine our relative status within our place in this world. The group matters. So don't think of broken homes as just a house that each family will live in. Think of broken home from every level as a multiplicity, if you will, so that the individual and how that compounds across however many households and how that collectively affects us. We got to fix the house of us as a people, not via exceptions. We have to make this a large-scale movement.
If we hate each other, we won't be able to build righteous families.
And we can't build healthy families if we have all this self-hate. We can't build healthy families if we hate the opposite sex. This person could be a part of your family. So remember that. And in working towards building the Black family, we got to remove the gender war issues.
We act like we should slice ourselves into different parts, but other populations aren't like this.
I believe other groups are difficult to slice because they're so highly married and they have so many families. It could affect them emotionally to have to talk down to someone of the opposite sex because that could be their loved one and it's just too close. Whereas with all our broken homes, we're not gonna hurt that much if we slice that person or their likeness because they already cut themselves off from us. We don't give each other even incentive to value our worth to each other if we're not going to even be present. So we have to be present if we want to also make amends, if we want our people to speak highly of us.
The Black family needs to rise. Hopes for Black couples and families.
My hope for Black people, and especially Black couples, is that more Black couples will see it upon themselves to get married. Not just stay in long-term, what feels like they're dating for however many centuries, just get married at some point. It's the most adult thing you can do. It's a very commendable, respectable choice. Ideally, many of our people will begin to veer from the reckless breeding and more true commitment, true connection via marriage. My hope for Black families and couples is that they will increase. My hope is that we will begin to mend the breach and create greater unity, pro-Black style unity, really tap into the truest form of ourselves. Yes, we must apologize to each other, and when we unify, no more of the blame game, no more of the harassment, but just, hey, I could have done this better, or, I do apologize for my role in this. Let's make family, let's make marriage, let's make hope, let's make peace. Love is greater, it's more fueling, it's more replenishing, it's more thorough, it's richer than trauma and pain, and it actually replenishes and multiplies greater than hate can ever do. So I believe we should be fruitful, and fruitfulness is the fruit of the Spirit, which is love, joy, kindness, peace, and there are many other fruits of the Spirit, but we need to appease that. I look forward to the primitivities between us to be ended, and of course across gender, of course across any other of the vantage points that we share, because I believe we should be gathering for the sense of restoration and hope. And yes, there was a blip in time where everything went bad, but I believe we've come through so much, so that inspires us to believe in greater.
Every one of us is a potential member to a future nuclear family, so let us become more family-friendly.
These men and women could be someone's potential spouse. These men and women could be the fathers and mothers in a beautiful nuclear family that we need. See, we are in a marriage crisis. We are in what feels like a deficit of beautiful nuclear families being formed, when there should be so many beautiful Black nuclear families that it would be akin to other demographics. And what you're doing with this rhetoric that is anti the opposite sex is you're making it in a sense, divorce. You're divorcing us as a people from being able to say, let us awaken, let us unite, let us form families. You're making it difficult, which is a very bad selling point, because how are we going to be appealing to the opposite sex? You have to understand there is a way that we can persuade each other with information. If we were mostly bad, and I know we have many evil traits and characteristics, then many of us wouldn't even exist. We would live in total carnage. But clearly there has to be some hope if there are some nuclear families. And we have to look at that remnant and we have to say, you know what, let's not throw everyone away because of the actions of the very wicked. And those wicked people, they already have their PR. So why can't we be PR for those who want righteous lives? Why can't we recognize that the opposite sex, being that they are a future portion in somebody's family, because they could be either someone's wife one day or someone's husband one day and somebody's parents, why can't we recognize that's making a positive impact in our demographic? We should celebrate Black families, celebrate Black couples, celebrate the union of our people, because that's restoration. After all that we've endured, after all that we've seen, after all that we've lived for centuries, that's true hope. If you've come through so much, you would think that's an incentive to say, you know what, there is a rising tide in us. There is meaning within us. There is hope within us. There is that likelihood of change because we've come through extremes. We're not a people that lived in a very vague and bland reality. We've lived on the extremes of life. So you've gone through these extremes before. Make peace somehow regardless. If you can go through extreme pain and somehow come out at the end of it as a people, then you can figure out what that would look like internally. It's like you can figure out the outside issues, but you don't know how to figure out our home life and domestic issues. This gender war is domestic chaos. We need domestic peace. We need domestic duties. We need more of that sense of domesticity. We need more homes that are comprised of beautiful families. No competition between the families. We don't have to have a hierarchy amongst the families. We don't have to feel like certain couples are more attractive than others. We don't have to be cosmetic and vain. We just need to appreciate these Black couples because these are going to be beautiful families one day. This is the foundation. This is the origin story to a very beautiful bloodline. They are making a very adult decision to mend with the opposite sex and make a family. As adults, we could do anything, and much of which we do is chaos. So if you see an adult decide, you know what, they want to make a positive impact in this world, they want to make a family, understand that that's no small feat. We need to understand that these couples, being that they are the future role player in a family, that they play a role in many other generations to come, and they also play a role in the sanctity of us collectively today. Collectivism, intergenerational, opposite sexes, and any other demographic marker that makes us us, we have to unite those factions, not divide that. We don't want to be strangers to future generations who will resent us. We don't want our children to be traumatized. We don't want our people to be confused. So this is no small feat. I'm sure God is very proud of these couples and families. It must be encouraged. It must be the way we are conditioned to create families and to create love, not hate. Mature in this arena so that love can be the standard.
Our humanity matters.
I will say the only good thing about this gender war is that, in an ironic sense, it actually humanizes each other. Other groups, when they look at us, I don't even think they see us as human. I don't even think they recognize the complexity of our humanity beyond what they might perceive as a primate. But us, at the very least, we humanize each other. At least the men see the women as women. At least the women see the men as men. Are we unsure about how we are living up to our man/womanhood depending on the situation? Yes. Are we feeling like there is a lack in the opposite sex depending on the situation? Yes. But at the very least, you're humanizing each other. So if you can humanize each other to see that this person is actually more than just a potential primate, they're not some kind of gorilla or ape or, that's how I perceive other groups see us. And honestly, I think we see each other as that too, but that's another story. But you see them for their humanity, right? So the same way you can humanize their biological sex to know, hey, that's a man, that's not a boy, or any of the disparaging terms that have been used to make us seem like the men were boys, the women were girls, or whatever. There were many slurs throughout our history, and you can even research the different terms used against us to make our humanity less than, to make us seem like mere items that could be disposed. Can we somehow build upon this, but for the good? Can we somehow build upon our humanization of each other, but in a way that would actually be charming? Because yes, you do have men, and yes, you do have women in your demographic. Humanize each other, though, for more than just a hateful way. Instead of the blame game, humanize each other like, well, I exist, this is my DNA, and take the pride in knowing, hey, these are my people, my people. If you can see that they're people in one sense, try to see the humanity of them in other senses as well. You know how you could take the fact that we were brought very low and see the bad of it and how it dehumanized us across the biological sexes? You can also take that and make it a better argument. For example, you could say, well, we're people that we've been equally brought low, so that means we have equal incentive to rise. Rather than saying, well, we have been equally brought low, so then making it a biological sex difficulty. Ironically, you still wouldn't want them to be so inferior to you so that all the onus of responsibility is on you. So you can't just blame the opposite sex unless you want all the onus of responsibility on them, so that if, let's say, they were to get power, they had to control you next. Instead of that being the case, let's live in an equitable way. The men and the women in our own ways, in a way that complements one another, and it doesn't take away from the other, but in our own ways we can rise to, but we still contribute to the greater good. It's not this primitivity from, oh, well, women have to be whatever the trope is, or men have to be whatever the trope is. Yes, there are strengths that men possess, women possess, but ultimately, let's bring that together.
I'm feeling lonely, I'm losing energy. I run away just to say what's left.
Understanding the depths of unity via marriage, community, and self-love.
We must let these families unite us. Let's think of the levels how these families unite us. You take two strangers, they meet. That kinship forms through them being a couple. And so you're uniting at least two people, which is creating at least some sort of peace. And they need something from each other. They're both human resources. So you're giving them access to a better life through using their mate as a potential resource, an emotional resource, a progenitor as a resource, and other resources that they can bring you. You're also merging their families. So you're taking their nuclear families and you're binding that to each other via their marriage. And then also their extended families are being bound via their marriage. So you're uniting at least two families, the extended and nuclear, when you unite two people via marriage. And think of how many extended families make up a larger world. You could be innately or in different degrees of separation related to each other, so you're increasing that sense of kinship because that closeness through however many families are being merged within a given population increases. So we become this larger family group with the amount of marriages that bind us. And you're not going to be bound via reckless breeding. You're binding yourself by replenishing a population within an orderly construct, which creates more incentive and loyalty and more of that kinship. We can also, via marriage, understand that we can provide a circulation of resources to each other, mentally, emotionally, as human beings. We can also understand that by constantly marrying into ourselves, we are creating allies. The less enemies we can have as a population, the better for us. We need to know that we have shared risk. And you know you have shared risk when you have shared placement within a population such as ours. So with all these families, they become more of an accountability to one another because they have a shared risk in the Black family. They have a shared risk in our demographic because they bound themselves to us. As we continually get married, we will want our families to do well, so our values become united. And then we become united by seeing ourselves in this larger entity. We can reduce our vulnerability because we're not so isolated as we constantly marry and create families. Nuclear families are economies because in each household is a set of people who have qualities they can distribute to the larger whole. And if we bring in our families as a whole together, we can have the resources we need within ourselves. So let's let the family unite us. Let's let love unite us. Let's let healing unite us. Let's let restoration unite us. Let's let peace unite us. We need to restore whatever the brokenness is. And let's draw a truce, at least individually, and then have that work its way up.
Let us become families. Let us become the Black family. Let the Black family make a comeback. We have got to let go of our anti-Black mentality and instead embrace total unity between us.
We have many divisions within our collective and in varying categorical fashions. Our quote unquote isms, though vast and in many mainly mundane ways, must be corrected. Let's not see these isms as things that should retain themselves. These are aspects of us that need to leave, and most of which are primitive, to take different markers of what makes up a population and making that the war ground between us. These are aspects that enhance us. These are aspects that add variety. These are aspects that give you choice. These are not aspects that take away from the greater good of what we are designed to be. This is what we should embrace, which is our diversity, not the things that you feel would be better off if we were all identical, but the things that are better off because we're not. We can be the same people, but in many different formats. We're still the same people, but with our nuances. We have to understand that this gender war is heinous because it's a domestic form of anti-blackness. Even if all of these isms were equal, and in a way they are, if you can see one as bad, then you should see all of them as bad. Get rid of all of these isms so that we can embrace total unity. We need to progenerate ourselves, restore ourselves as we progenerate. We need to increase the quality of our households, increase the quality of our offspring, increase the quality of our minds. But let's not create enemies anymore. You've done that long enough. Let's try to create peace. Is it going to take creativity? Yes, but we are a very creative people. We have persevered much, but don't let this gender war be the end of us.
The depth of anti-marriage.
Being anti-marriage because we've gotten to the point where we make non-issues massive issues, and massive issues seem like it's not a big deal. But I'll have you understand that being anti-marriage is not just being anti the love of your life or anti having a nice home to come home to with another person. It's anti the structural advantages that comes with marriage. Structural, including psychological. Even if people want to talk about and debate what they consider wealth disparities between married families versus unmarried families, you'll never be able to debate the psychological deficit that you're creating in offspring with these broken homes. You'll never be able to debate the fact that your sons who are in broken homes are 20 times likelier to create violence. There is too much of a link, and this has been studied since the late 1800s and early 1900s, the broken home link and criminality. So for you to be anti-marriage, you're anti the sanctity of life itself. And if you're going to be pro-us, you got to be pro-us, not just us in words, not just us as compared to other groups. You need to be pro-us in every aspect of our lived activity that we would want to tap into. So how are you going to be pro-black but you're anti-marriage? What if people want to get married? You don't want to support that? How are you going to be pro-black but you don't believe in the black family? Knowing how much order the family creates, but even just the fact that it's a beautiful thing. Even if you didn't want to understand the structural advantages, what's the point of not supporting the black family?
Can we learn to humanize, contextualize, and carefully relay information rather than demonize each other with these matters?
And we have to get to a point where we understand the difference between who we are within information versus what information says about us. Because of this silly gender war, just because you belong to a certain biology now, you're presumed to be that information rather than what the information says about you. And you can be in but not of something. And there can even be accuracies that are within it, but that you can contextualize so that you can provide a greater depth of our humanity, so that it's not so much, oh, it's because they're doing this because they're a demon. Rather, they're doing this because they're acting out of trauma, or they're doing this because they're acting out of pain. And when you know that that's the source, you can then find a way to deal with that. It's not going to make us better if you just make us demons. Contextualize how we became this way and the conditions that would harden our hearts. And let's also work towards softening our hearts. We need more context. That's our mercy. Give us context, and that's our breathing room. Give us context, and that's our hope. Give us context, and that's our way to realize we can undo the current problems instead of making it seem like this is so embedded in you from birth that you can never change it. And if that were the case, if you really thought it was that bad, then stop breeding recklessly, because all you're doing is birthing more people into the oblivion. If you really think it's all that bad, that black men and women are all that bad, that black women and men are all that bad, stop having kids with these people so that those kids don't grow up to be the person that you're also going to resent. If you can't find solutions to these issues, then just keep breeding recklessly within these issues. There's more slurs, trauma, and chaos than anything else in our demographic, and gender wars like this don't do anything to benefit us. We're continuing this chaos generation after generation, this sorrow, this same chaos that we keep going through. Where is it going to change? Where? When? How? Through us and the choices that we make and the words that we use and how we choose to interact with one another. I am putting up a truce. I don't want to be a part of this war. I'm raising my black flag and I'm putting it right in the air because I don't want to be a part of this circus. I don't want to be a part of this gender war. I don't want to have their talking points and mentality. I don't want to be a part of this never-ending loop of stupidity because it looks silly. It looks draining. It looks saddening to wake up into that mind frame every single day. And to have to think about how much you hate and have to process all that energy within yourselves, that's going to give you sicknesses within your bodies. That's going to give you a lot more issues than it is solutions. So I am putting up a truce. I ask whoever's listening to join me. Decide within yourselves today whether or not you want to be a part of this war. That's going nowhere, by the way. Funny thing is, the people on this war, they don't even know what they're going to do if they were to win the war. They don't even have a plan drawn out as to how they're going to win the war. So is it really a war where they actually have a logical map, where they actually have a series of mechanisms and plan that they can look at and say, hey, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it? Or are they just trying to destroy as many people as possible, especially within us? I don't want to contribute to the destruction. Why, shall I say, would I not want to contribute to this? Because I believe there's better. I believe that with the couples that I've seen and the families that I've seen, that they are that glimmer of hope. I'm choosing not to assume the worst of them. I'm choosing not to think that they are contributing to the chaos, because the spirit of us can rise. The spirit of us has been down many bad roads before, and it has risen and it has surpassed many expectations before. It's just a matter of, do we want to be regulated? It's just a matter of choice and consent. Do we choose to rise from these ashes? I know there's hope, because even our very life is a miracle. None of us should really even exist, but somehow we do. So I'm gonna try to connect all these little miracles of ourselves and work towards that greater dialogue. Yeah, I get it, there are issues. But you know what's funny? We often talk about what other demographics were, at least depending on the space you are. They'll say, oh, back in ancient history, black people were, and they'll talk about how you had a higher prominence. And they'll also talk about how other demographics were in contrast. You have to ask yourself, how did they get to the position you're saying you were in, and you got to the position that you say they were in? They clearly had strategies. They clearly had plans. And even if they had these deficits, they worked together and they said within themselves, we got to make a truce. They gave up their primitivities and they worked towards the greater good. They gave up their sorrows and their mourning and their grief. And they knew those things were harsh and they knew those things were bad. But they also said, you know what, we have to work towards that greater good. And now we can learn from them. At some point, what is the greater good?
We are the breakdown of the black family.
We have to stop with these, well, what contributed to the breakdown of the black family, and act as if you have to go 60 years ago to know that. No, you are the breakdown of the black family in today's era. You know what's the breakdown of the black family? Over-sexualized behaviors. You know what's the breakdown of the black family? The lack of true communication. The lack of us creating solutions so that we can work better in creating more families. The lack of family-friendly programming. The antisocial music and behaviors that we project. The antisocial character traits that we have. This wanting up of the opposite sex. The acting like the opposite sex is useless. Yet God created this interdependent species. So why would we keep going backwards in the past and try to ask, like if it's outside of us, what the breakdown of the black family is? We are the breakdown of the black family. Anytime we are anti-marriage, you are the breakdown of the black family. Anytime you don't support black couples getting married, you are the breakdown of the black family. Because what you want them to do is have reckless breeding habits. That's what you're going to support. But when they get married, people want to talk about they're too young for marriage. People want to talk about how they should not get married because they could potentially have a divorce. You are the breakdown of the black family. Understand your role and take responsibility of it. You want to fix the black family? Then create them, sustain them, furnish them, shift them. You see how other demographics, they don't just get married, they have a culture surrounding marriage. How do they create this in their cultures? They write books, they have seminars, they make forums, they have self-help groups, they have accountability groups, they have support groups. They do all these things just to support marriage and the family. They help teach you how to be spouses. They help teach you how to be parents even. They use information to help benefit and enrich their communities. Are they experiencing a breakdown of the family? If they were, they will counter it. With us, you let it break down and then you feed into the breakdown. Let's hold ourselves accountable for the breakdown of the black family. Because even if other groups did play a certain role, why didn't you counter that?
Let's make family, not war.
Hopefully, we can have more love than hate. we're drowning in hate, so let's change that. Hopefully we can decide this stuff is getting annoying and silly and work towards rising out of that. And let's make family, not war. Let's make community, not dissolution of groups. Let's make hope. Let's make peace. Let's make each other one. Let's become a people, and let's restore ourselves. I think we can do it. I think we've come through so much. I think we are a creative people. I think we have many solutions. We got ourselves out of different captivities and binds before. Let's see how we can get ourselves out of this one. Yes, we have many issues, but we can also look at that in a different way and say, you know what, with as many issues as we have, we can also have many solutions. I choose love. I choose to see us in a hopeful way. I hope that this video inspired and empowered you. My name is Gershly Karen Pierre, and I'm pro-marriage and pro the nuclear family. Stay tuned for more.
I will make an everlasting covenant with them. I will never turn away from doing good to them, and I will put my fear in their hearts, so that they will never turn away from me. Yes, I will rejoice in doing them good, and I will faithfully plant them in this land with all my heart and with all my soul. Jeremiah 32 verses 40 and 41. It is time for all beautiful black families, couples, and people to awaken, and this is the era we will. Thanks for watching.